On August 9, 1945, the dawn over Nagasaki seemed innocent. The sky was covered with soft clouds. The air smelled of salt, and the children walked to school with the nonchalance of someone who does not suspect the end. In the distance, the siren sound had become a habit. One more warning, they thought. One more day of war that seemed endless. But at 11,000 M, the B-29 Boxcar bomber was flying loaded with the most powerful weapon ever created. Their initial target was covered by a smokescreen. The pilot decided to change course. No one knew it yet, but that small twist would seal the fate of an entire city. At 11:02 a.m. over the Hurakai Valley, the plutonium bomb, known as Fatman, fell. It detonated at 500 m altitude, releasing the power equivalent of 21,000 tons of TNT. A white light, more intense than the sun, covered the horizon. Shadows were etched into the walls. The silence was broken in a roar that devoured houses, temples, schools. More than 60,000 people disappeared in seconds. Tens of thousands would die in the following days. Japan, exhausted, understood what the end meant, and 6 days later the emperor spoke on the radio for the first time. We must endure the unbearable. The world had changed, but to understand how it got here, we have to go back to the roots of the storm. Europe was collating after 4 years of death. The claw was over, but not the violence. The borders had been redrawn with ink and resentment. The Treaty of Versailles imposed impossible conditions on Germany. Reparations, humiliation, disarmament. It was not a peace treaty. It was a seed of revenge. Italy, despite being on the winning side, felt betrayed. Japan, which had fought alongside the Allies, was ignored in the negotiations, and Russia, torn apart by revolution, was thrown out of balance. The old world collapsed, but in its ruins a new generation began to believe in dangerous promises of order, power, and pride, words that seduced misery-weary multitudes. Thus, from the rubble of the past emerged 3 names that would change history: Hitler, Mussolini, and the Japanese militarists. In Italy, Mussolini raised fascism under the cry of discipline and strength. In Germany, Hitler fed the anger of the people with a lie disguised as hope that Germany had not been defeated, but betrayed. And in Asia, Japan became convinced that it was its destiny to dominate the Pacific. 3 different paths, but guided by the same shadow, that of totalitarianism. On September 1st, 1939, Germany crossed the Polish border. The sky was covered with fire and dust. Within 2 weeks, Poland fell. The lightning had begun. The United Kingdom and France declared war, but it was too late. The Blitzkrieg, combined speed, surprise, and coordination. Tanks, artillery, and aviation advanced as one beast of steel. In less than a year, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and the Netherlands were devastated. On May 10, 1940, Germany invaded France. The Allied armies were surrounded at Dunkirk. On that beach, caught between the sea and the enemy, more than 300,000 soldiers awaited their end. But history sometimes has its miracles. Under constant fire, a flotilla of civilian ships crossed the canal. Fishing boats, tugboats, private yachts. Ordinary men saved the army. That evacuation would be remembered as Operation Dynamo. A defeat turned into a symbol of hope. On June 25th, France signed its surrender in the same carriage where Germany had surrendered its arms in 1918. Hitler sat down in the same seat and smiled. The past had been avenged. Europe was on its knees. Only one island resisted: the United Kingdom, the last bastion. In the summer of 1940, Hitler ordered the start of Operation Sea Lion. The invasion would begin with the destruction of the British sky. But what he did not imagine was that the air could also have its resistance. The Battle of Britain began on July 10th. Day after day, German squadrons crossed the Channel. British radars detected their arrival. The RAF pilots, exhausted, took off again and again. The roar of the speed fighters was mixed with sirens and screams. On the ground, the population survived in underground shelters under the roar of bombs that fell relentlessly. London burned, but it did not fall. Churchill summed it up with a phrase that still resonates: "Never have so many owed so much to so few." When winter came, Hitler called off the invasion. He had lost his first battle. The lightning had stopped in the British sky. Meanwhile, the war was expanding. In the Mediterranean, the British fleet launched a daring operation. On the night of November 11th, 1940, swordfish biplanes attacked the Italian port of Taranto. They sank 3 battleships. It was the first successful air attack on a fleet at harbor, a rehearsal for what Japan would do a year later at Pearl Harbor. In North Africa, Mussolini sought glory but found disaster. His offensive against Egypt failed, and Hitler sent reinforcements. Among them, a general who would earn the admiration even of his enemies, Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox. His tactics were fast, precise, unpredictable. The desert became a deadly chessboard, but distance and fuel were its enemies. Each victory took him away from his supply, and the desert slowly began to swallow up his advance. In the spring of 1941, Germany turned its gaze eastward. On June 22nd, more than 3 million soldiers crossed the Soviet border. Operation Barbarossa had begun. The front stretched for thousands of miles. The Red Army, surprised, retreated before the implacable force of the enemy. Entire cities fell. Minsk, Kiev, Smolensk. It seemed that nothing could stop the Germans, but the Russian winter arrived, and with it the revenge of the cold. Temperatures dropped to minus 40 degrees. The engines froze. The guns didn't fire. Men died without a fight, devoured by the snow. In December, the Soviet army counterattacked. The German troops fell back. For the first time, Hitler had underestimated his enemy. Meanwhile, a silent war was being waged in the Atlantic. German boats stalked Allied convoys carrying supplies to Britain. It was the Battle of the Atlantic. The submarines hunted in packs. Ship after ship disappeared without a trace. But technology changed course. Radar, Enigma's cracked codes, and long-range aircraft transformed fighter into endurance. The sea wolves began to fall, and with them the dominance of the Axis over the ocean. The world was exhausted. 6 years of war had left ruins on 3 continents, but the horror had not yet shown its final face. In August 1945, the United States decided to drop a new weapon on Japan. On August 6th, Little Boy fell on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Fat Man destroyed Nagasaki. 2 flashes that changed history. In a matter of seconds, the cities turned to dust. The shadows of the bodies were etched into the walls. Humanity had crossed a limit that it could no longer retrace. On September 2nd, 1945, the war officially ended. But the world that emerged was not the same. From the ruins arose new powers, new ideologies, new fears. The Cold War began before the smoke dissipated, and yet, in the ashes, humanity rebuilt. Cities, dreams, hopes. The price was incalculable, but the lesson was clear. War could destroy everything except the human capacity to start again. Thank you for joining Historical Archives. Subscribe for weekly documentaries, forgotten stories, and legendary moments. Until next time, keep exploring history.